welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be my birth story. So if you haven't seen it, I did put up a vlog of the birth. As most of you guys know, I had twin girls at the end of July, and I was able to get, for the most part, the birth that I wanted. So I'm really excited to share this story with you guys. I put up a birth vlog, so video clips of the birth. I will link that for you guys if you want to go watch that. Because of how things transpired and the timing and everything, there's a lot that you miss kind of in the beginning that I felt like I really wanted to sit down and, like I said, give some narrative to that and kind of explain what happened and how we ended up, going into labor and, kind of just explain everything that wasn't explained in the vlog. All right, so let's just hop right into the story. So as most of you know, if you watch my pregnancy vlogs, I went to a doctor's office that had many different doctors in the practice, and all throughout my pregnancy, I was told by different doctors, yes, your chance of having a vaginal delivery are good. This is your third pregnancy. Your other two were vaginal. You'll be fine. And then I had other doctor, like specifically one doctor who was very just kind of told me like I just needed to settle my mind on having a C-section, that was probably what was going to happen, and he just wasn't very encouraging or supportive, and that was really bothersome to me. But because of the practice that I was with, you don't get to choose. Whoever's there on the day that you deliver is who delivers you. So I just wanted to explain that really quick. I had two female doctors that I absolutely loved, one of which had had twins before and had them vaginally. And the other doctor was just incredibly supportive and encouraging. So I really knew that I had really wanted one of the two of them to be the one to deliver the girls. Even if it was a C-section, I wanted one of those two doctors. I really liked them and I felt like they respected me. And that's really important. So I went in on Wednesday morning for my 36-week appointment. I wasn't quite 36 weeks yet. I was a day shy of that. But I went in for my 36-week appointment, and I just hadn't been feeling good. If you watch my pregnancy vlogs, towards the end of my pregnancy, it was rough. It was really rough. I wasn't feeling good. I was having, some headaches, and I had lots of swelling and water retention, and I just was not feeling good. So I went in for that appointment, and at that time, they were doing weekly biophysical profiles on the girls to make sure that they were both doing okay. So I went in for my ultrasound first. Baby A, Ivy, was not doing any of the practice breathing. So they watch them for a whole 30 minutes, and if they don't do those markers in 30 minutes, then it knocks down their score. So in that 30-minute time frame, no matter how much juice I drank, we jiggled her, wiggled her, all this stuff, she wasn't doing any of her practice breathing. So that meant we got like a 6 out of 8 or whatever on that biophysical profile. So I then waited and went in to see the doctor for that appointment. And once I saw her, she, said she didn't really like that wasn't great. My blood pressure was a teeny bit high, not anything. She really didn't even say anything about it at that time. And I just hadn't been feeling Ivy move very much. And I think now it was just because she was so low. But they don't play around with that kind of stuff. So the doctor was like, let's just send you over to the hospital to be monitored so we can watch the babies for a little longer where you'll be a little more comfortable. And let's just watch them for a few hours and make sure everything's okay. So she also at that time did my Group B Strep test. And while she was down there, she decided to go ahead and check me. And I was 4 centimeters. So she said, okay, why don't you just go over to the hospital and be monitored, check the babies and everything. Called my husband and my sister and everything, and on the way to the hospital though, I started having contractions, and I really think it was because of the cervical check, but I was having some pretty intense contractions, and I was, kind of starting to stress out a little bit. And so when I got there, the hospital was full. So they put me in a triage room, and it was just this tiny little room. And sure enough, the doctor that came in was the one doctor that I really did not want. The nurse was awesome. She was really sweet. They gave me some fluids to try to stop at that point, we were watching the babies, but my contractions were like every 3 to 5 minutes. So they were kind of like, you might be going into labor. And like I said, I think I was 35 weeks and 6 days then. So they really, didn't want me to go into labor yet. So they said, let's get you some fluid, gave me some fluid through, IV. that wasn't stopping the contractions. They gave me that, I cannot remember the name of it, it's like tributaline or something like that. It's a shot that they give you that's kind of supposed to relax your uterus and stop contractions. That didn't do anything. At that point, my husband and my sister came up, and I was kind of, I was kind of worried. I was kind of like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I couldn't decide. Like, part of me wanted them to go ahead and be born, and the other part of me didn't. And I just remember that when the doctor came in, he looked at me and he said, so you still want to try to have these babies vaginally? And I was like, yes, I do. And at that point, something in me just said, you cannot have these babies like right now. You cannot have these babies with this doctor. This is going to make your birth experience not what you want it to be. And I just started feeling this internal like struggle and stress. And I don't know how to explain everything that I was feeling at the time. My mom was trying to decide if she should get in the car and come down. My husband was there and my sister was there, and they were awesome support, but internally I was just really, really struggling. And so I just kind of started praying and talking to the babies, and I was like, y'all, I'm not ready for you to come yet. I'm just not ready. And I rolled over and the whole time I had been having very consistent contractions. I rolled over to my left-hand side and closed my eyes and just like held onto the side of the bed and just closed my eyes and breathed. And I never had another contraction. They just gone, like vanished out of thin air. So the nurse came back in and was like giving me the list of all the doctors that were on call over the coming days. Well, the next day, Thursday, and they're on 24-hour shifts. That next day was one of my favorite doctors, one of the female doctors that I had really hoped would deliver the girls. And so the nurse was like, when you go home, tomorrow morning, you need to walk, you need to have sex, you need to she was listing off all the things to try to induce labor. At that point, I would have been 36 weeks. And she was like, if you want to try to get that doctor to be the one to deliver, then this is what you need to do. And so anyways, the male doctor that I wasn't really super fond of came in, and he was like, well, if you haven't made any progress in dilation, then I'll just let you go home. And I was like, awesome, great, wonderful. So he checked me. I was still a 4, no cervical change. So he said, okay, go home. So that is what I did. Packed up all my crap and got in the car and went home very happily. My mom was there at that point. She'd come to our house. So she was hanging out there with the kids, and I was pretty tired. It had been a very eventful day, and I was a little stressed. The babies, by the way, looked great the whole time on the monitors we were there. But as we were leaving, the doctor said, your blood pressures were a little high. Let me check it one more time. So they checked it one more time. It was still a little high, but nothing freaky. And so he said, okay, you can go home. Well, the next morning I woke up and I was trying to decide what I wanted to do. I knew the doctors that were on call over the next few days. I knew which ones I would be comfortable with delivering and which ones I wouldn't. And so I was just like trying to decide what to do. Should I walk and try to get these babies out, or should I just wait for my scheduled induction, which was basically a week from that day? I was being induced at 37 weeks exactly because of some abnormalities on ultrasound and some issues with the babies. If you've seen my pregnancy vlogs, you know about that. So they were inducing me at 37 weeks because they felt like at that point the babies were safer out than in. So it was kind of like this week, like this week-long difference, and I just couldn't decide kind of what to do. But I was sitting there sipping coffee, talking with my mom, and the phone rang, and it was my doctor's office. And it turns out that the doctor that had been there the day before had called and just said that he really wanted me to come into the office so they could check my blood pressure again. That he had looked back through my chart at what my normal blood pressure is, and then what it was over the period of time that I was at the hospital on Wednesday, which was from about before lunch until like 7. So I was there for about 7 or 8 hours being monitored, and having consistent contractions for most of the time that I was there. But luckily, no cervical change, like I said, all that. So he said, I want you to come into the office so we can check your blood pressure again this morning. Well, I had woken up at like 3 o'clock that morning, and I had a headache, and I thought it was kind of strange, because I didn't usually wake up in the middle of the night for headaches. I usually woke up because I had to pee. But I had a headache, and so I thought it was kind of weird. And so when he called and said, I want you to come into the office to have your blood pressure checked, I was kind of like, okay, I'm okay with that because, having headaches and swelling, and that time was when I started kind of having like a teeny bit of spotty vision. My mom drove me to the doctor. She stayed in the car with the kids. I went in because it was just, like I said, a blood pressure check. Well, the doctor checked my blood pressure a different doctor checked my blood pressure at the office, and he was like, yeah, I don't really like how high it is, so they checked my urine, and there was protein in my urine. So he said, I'm going to send you back to the hospital. They wanted my blood pressure monitored for a few hours, and to check the protein again and do some blood work, because I guess they can also check for preeclampsia through blood work to see kind of what's going on internally. Dropped me off. Once again, I was put into a triage area, really tiny. The hospital was totally full, like totally full. It was crazy how busy they were. I think they ended up having like 120 something babies that were in there at the time that we were there. I feel like that's what they said. It was crazy. So they put me in this little tiny triage room, monitored my blood pressure. CR left work and came up there to be with me, and I just tried to like close my eyes and everything, but my blood pressure still stayed high. And they had me pee again to check my urine when I, once again when I got there. So I was on the monitors for a couple hours, and then the midwife came in because the doctor was so busy, so they sent in the midwife. And she checked me, and it was actually the midwife that delivered Shelby, so it's very nice to see her. And she checked me, and she was like, well, you're 5 centimeters. She's like, you're not going to go home. There's just no way. You're not going to go home. Not pregnant with twins, 5 centimeters with moderate to high blood pressure. So, so she said, you're going to be admitted. And I was like, okay, well, and so, I posted on Instagram stories, called everybody, let everybody know that, we were being admitted, and I was having contractions. They just weren't super consistent. So they put me in a room, and when I got into the room, the nurse was in there, hooking up my IV, doing all this stuff, and the doctor came in, and it was the doctor I told you guys, that one of the ones I really loved and really wanted to be my doctor for delivery. She came in, and she said, you're 36 weeks, your blood pressure's high, but it's not high enough for us to call this preeclampsia and induce you. She's like, you're having contractions, but you're not in active labor. And so she was like, we're going to have to wait and for your blood pressure or for your urine sample to come back. If there's protein again, then, we can call this is preeclampsia. Then you'll be diagnosed with preeclampsia. So she said, I'm going to check you again. And I was like, okay. They just checked me, but okay. So she gave me a very aggressive cervical check. She told me, she's like, I really do not want to send you home, and I can't see us sending you home at 5 centimeters. But, whatever. So she checked me. Kind of more like a membrane sweep than a cervical check. But when she checked me, she was like, yeah, I can stretch you to a 6. So at that point, 6 centimeters is considered, I think, is where they're cut off for admitting you. She said, you're a 6. And literally, as soon as she took her hand out and stepped back and started talking, I had my first contraction. And from there, they were every 2 to 3 minutes. That was all it took, was her slightly aggressive cervical check, and my body just flipped into labor, and about 10 minutes later, she came back and said, yes, your urine is still, has protein, so preeclampsia is, the diagnosis, but they didn't even, she was like, we're not even going to start Pitocin or do anything like that because you are contracting regularly on your own. So I technically wasn't induced. I wasn't induced. I went into labor on my own with a little help from the doctor. And so there we were. We were in the hospital. We were doing this. So called my sister to come up and bring up all of our stuff. But in the few hours between when she did that check and when my sister got there, these contractions were just rolling back to back every 2 to 3 minutes. I wasn't talking. I was eyes closed, just breathing through them. And it was really hard because they had me on the monitor for both babies, and I had an IV, so I couldn't get up or do anything. I just kind of had to lay there. And that was really difficult, was not being able to do anything to cope with the pain. I knew I was going to get an epidural just because I told you guys before, if I went into delivery and baby A came out fine and baby B needed a C-section, I didn't want to have to be knocked out for that. So I wanted to go ahead and have an epidural. It was a few hours later when my sister showed up, And, you can see that in the footage. I was just kind of on the bed with my eyes closed, like breathing. They called the anesthesiologist. He was in a C-section. And so about an hour later, still hadn't showed up. And I heard my nurse say on the phone, like, really gonna need him to get up here. We've got a twin delivery. She's already at 6 centimeters. Kind of gonna need him to come soon. Not to rush him, but, just to kind of let them know that at that point they weren't sure if I was just gonna like all of a sudden like be ready to push, or what, how long it was gonna take. Anesthesiologist finally showed up. I was definitely happy to see him. And this is where, like I said, this is really where the footage begins, because that's when my sister got there and she started filming and my husband started filming. So unfortunately, I was so big and uncomfortable. And, when you're pregnant with twins, like when you're pregnant in general, but, when you're pregnant with twins, everything is just kind of out of place and misaligned. So when I sat up, they have you sit so your spine is straight. I couldn't even sit straight and my hips were off and stuff. So he had a really difficult time, and they need you to like curl over so they can get to your spine. I had 2 babies in there, so I could not like curl over myself very well at all. The nurse was basically just like pushing down on my shoulders to try to hold me down so that he could find the right spot. And he hit the wrong spot about 15 times before he hit the right spot, bless his heart. He was very nice, and it wasn't that he was doing a bad job, it was just a difficult epidural to place. And it was very painful for me at that point. I kept having like these electric shock shooting pains going down my legs. It was pretty painful. I was just doing my best to breathe through it, because of course you're still contracting and feeling all of that pain, and they're doing this behind you and you can't move. And it took a while because it was so hard to place. So it was just, it was tough. It was really tough. That part was tough. So they did finally get the epidural placed and all is well. I totally forgot to mention that once they got me checked in and decided I was admitted and 6 centimeters and all of that, they did come in with an ultrasound machine to check the baby's positions. And Miss Amelia had turned breech. So baby A, IV, was head down still, but baby B, Miss Amelia, had turned breech. And she had been head down for weeks and weeks and weeks. And she flipped breech. And I looked at the doctor like, what's she gonna say? And she was like, do you still wanna have a vaginal delivery? We talked about risks and everything with a breech delivery, and I felt very confident in myself and in her and in my doctor. And I said, yes, absolutely. I still want to try for a vaginal delivery. And so she was like, okay, that's what we'll do then. And she was so supportive. It was so awesome, because the male doctor that had been there the day before does not do breech delivery. So had he been my doctor, it would have been an automatic C-section. So anyways, so I got my epidural. I was feeling much better, except for the fact that my uterus was so large and distended that the epidural couldn't even really reach the very top of it. So I was still feeling the contractions along this band of like the top of my uterus. And combine that with Amelia kind of having her head really jammed up there, it was still really hard for me to breathe. I was kind of like turned and twisted, just trying to get some air and get some relief from that pain. The doctor came back in, and they decided they were going to wait to break my water, because there was another lady that they were delivering, and they just felt like once they broke my water, things were going to go really fast. So she had checked me and I was at a 7, and they decided just to wait to break my water until this other lady delivered and all of that. So I was like, that's fine. Another few hours went by. That woman had delivered. They came back in and decided that, to go ahead and break my water. She did that. And when she broke my water, both the doctor and the nurse and my sister were all like, oh my gosh. It was they all said it was the most water they had ever seen. The nurse was like, I feel like you just lost 10 pounds just from the water. Miss Ivy had a ton of amniotic fluid, a ton. And it was just, you could hear it. Someone noticed in the birth video, they were like, I swear I could hear your water when they broke it. And you could. It was just like this gushing sound. It was crazy. So yeah, tons and tons of water came out. Well, when that happened, they were kind of, covering me back up and everything. And all of a sudden, Ivy's heart rate just plummeted down into like the 80s. And if they've ever had that happen, you know that what happens next is about 15 people come running into your room. They grab you, they flip you, put stuff like put the big peanut ball between your legs. They do everything they can to get the baby's heart rate to come back up. And so I'd seen this happen before. I'd seen it happen to friends. I knew that this could happen. And something in me, as soon as it happened, just said, you have to be calm. Talk to your baby. Tell her she's okay. Tell her that she's okay, and that, you know, that she was going to be okay, so that her heart rate would come back up and everything would be fine. So I just closed my eyes, and I mean to tell you, you feel like a beached whale when these nurses are all just literally flopping your giant pregnant body back and forth. But I just closed my eyes and I just prayed, and I talked to Ivy, and I told her that she was okay, that she was going to be fine, and it was okay, baby girl, and just to calm down. And it all lasted maybe a minute and a half. And I also felt like I really needed to be calm because I knew my husband was probably over there having a heart attack. So I was just trying so hard. They put the oxygen mask on me, and I just took deep breaths and talked to Ivy and let her know that everything was okay. And within about a minute and a half, her heart rate came back up. And I really think, we kind of laugh about it now, but I really think what happened was when all of her water came out, like, I really think that she like grabbed her cord. I think it was so much like going out and she lost her pool that she grabbed her cord and held on to it for a few seconds or a minute or whatever, and had to get herself resituated. So I think that she kind of clamped her cord a little bit, and that's what caused the heart rate to drop. But anyway, so after her heart rate came back up, you know, they got me into a good position that she was happy in and all of that, and, you know, kept me on oxygen for a little bit. And it was definitely scary, but it was over quickly. And, you know, CR came over, and I was like, it's okay, babe, you know, everything's fine. And I could see on his face, he was just like, what just happened? Then they just let me labor for a while. And when they came back to check me again, I believe I was 9 centimeters when they came back to check me again. So they came back and checked me a few hours later, and I think I was at 9 centimeters. So for the next few hours, because that was at like maybe 10 o'clock at night or so, for the next few hours I was just kind of stuck at 9. I had like this little cervical lip that wouldn't go away, and so they kind of, and my contractions had kind of petered off a little bit. So they kind of started talking about maybe we should start, you know, Pitocin. So they let me labor for a little longer, and I think it was somewhere after midnight. They came back to check, and I was still 9 centimeters. And I just had this little anterior cervical lip that wasn't going away. I was so discouraged, and I was like, nah, I don't want Pitocin, like I've made it this far. So I was like, I don't know, you know, I agreed to, you know, if that's what we needed to do, then that's what we needed to do. But I can't remember who mentioned it, if it was me, my sister, or the nurse, but someone said, like, maybe let's try a different position. Turned me to my left side and put like that peanut ball thing, I think, between my legs to kind of open your pelvis, and they flipped me to the left-hand side. Well, within minutes of her doing that, I felt a lot of pressure, like a lot of pressure. And I just knew that that was going to happen. And the nurse came back in with the Pitocin to start it. And at that point, the pressure was so intense that I was breathing and kind of deep growling, because I don't know how to explain it. If you've experienced it, you know. If you haven't, it's just, the only thing you can do is like kind of this very like deep primal like sound. It's like a, you know, you're like bearing down. It's this kind of like sound that you make to get through that. And so the nurse came in, she was like, let me check you again. And then she was like, oh yes, you're ready to, like, there's the head is right there, you're ready. So they started prepping everything for delivery. And because I was having twins, a lot of you guys were like, oh, there's so many people in the room, why are you in an OR? They have that huge light shine down on your crotch. Because I was having twins, and especially because baby B was breech. I had to deliver in the OR. So in case there was a need for an emergency C-section, they could handle that very quickly. Some doctors will let you deliver twins in the regular room, but because baby B was breached, that was just, we needed to be in the OR. That was where we were all safest. And because the babies were 36 weeks, and at that point they were 36 weeks in one day, they had each a team of nurses. There was someone down from the NICU just in case there was something wrong with them and they needed to go up to the NICU. So you kind of have, there was probably 15 to 20 people in there. I mean, and I knew that was going to be the case. Like I said, I was very much eyes closed, just breathing, because the pressure and pain was very intense at that point. So they got me back. They kind of have you shimmy off of your bed and onto the table, which is a really tiny table, especially when you're giant pregnant with twins. I was like, my fat butt is gonna fall off this table. But yeah, I mean, they got everything set up, and at that point, I was just kind of breathing, holding her in, if you will. And they told me it was, okay to push. And I want to say, I pushed through one full contraction, so it was like 3 or 4 pushes, and then with the next contraction, I pushed 3 or 4 times, maybe 3 times before she came out. And it was just crazy. Like, I could feel everything, not as much as you would if you didn't have an epidural, obviously. But I felt a lot of pressure, and I had kind of a difficult pushing experience with Shelby because I really resisted. The pain was a lot, and I was just holding back, and it made it that much harder. And I swore to myself this time I was not going to do that. I was going to lean into the pain to get the babies out and get them out faster. Like, I kept saying, like, to myself, like, the only way out is through. So the only way you're getting out of this and done with the pain is to go through the pain. So I just kind of gave it my all and pushed as hard as I could, and a little tiny little Ivy came out. And I mean, the doctor held her up and, waited for CR to come around and cut her cord. And she was just like this. She wasn't crying at first. She was just looking around and staring at us, which, if you guys know Ivy now, like, that's exactly what she does. She was just like looking and staring at us. I was like, hi, little baby. It took her a second, but and she wasn't like blue or anything. She was just looking around. And then CR cut her cord, and, they whisked her away. Because she was 36 weeks, there wasn't automatic skin to skin. They needed to check breathing and all that stuff. They needed to make sure she was okay. So whisked her away, and I was kind of looking over my shoulder at her, and the doctor checked again with ultrasound, and Amelia was still breached. She hadn't flipped. And I remember vaguely the doctor asking me, like, what I wanted to do. And I said, well, what do you think? Do you think we should just try to deliver her breech, or do you think we should try to flip her? And the doctor was like, honestly, I think that breech is going to be fine. Like, let's just do breech. And I was like, okay, I trust you. And I remember saying that to her, like, I trust you. And I did. I really and truly did. I was just like, whatever she says is best, I trust her. And so they broke Amelia's water, and the doctor kind of she didn't even like reach all the way up there or anything, but she's kind of reached and grabbed her little feet and had me push once, and she was out. And you can see in the video, like, the kind of like cheers and like woo in the room. Like, everybody was really like jazzed about this, like, very, very good, very easy breech delivery. So everybody thought it was kind of a neat birth, something they don't usually see. So of course, I would have loved if they'd both been head down, and that would have made everything easier and whatever, but breech is a variation of normal. So, she was fine. All is well that ends well, so it was okay. Amelia came out a little, like, shell-shocked. She was a little purplish blue, and it just kind of took her a minute to sort herself out and realize, like, she was out of the womb and what was happening. She looked a little shell-shocked. So they took her over and started, rubbing her, and she pinked right up and started crying. And I definitely held my breath for a few minutes. Like, is she okay? Is she okay? Not for a few minutes, but for a few seconds. Like, is she okay? Because she, like I said, she looked so like, what the heck just happened to me? But they were both fine. They were both totally fine. I could have just cried and hugged the mess out of my doctor for supporting me. I'm so grateful that she was so supportive of what I wanted, understood that, you know, that this was important to me and didn't make me feel like my opinions didn't matter, or like what I wanted was not okay, or I just don't know how to say it, but she came alongside me and supported me. And that was so, so valuable to me, and it was so empowering to me. So their birth was truly, truly incredible for me. It was healing after a pregnancy that was so, so difficult. You know, the beginning of my pregnancy was extremely difficult. The middle was regular difficult, and the end was pretty darn difficult again. So the birth just, to me, just kind of washed all of that hardness away, and really, you know, I don't know any other way to explain it than the fact that their birth seemed healing to me after everything that I had been through in their pregnancy. I mean, everything went well. They, you know, cleaned you up, delivered the placentas. I asked to see them. I really wanted to see what they looked like. You know, 2 placentas and everything. I just thought it would be really cool, and it was. My sister took pictures for me, and they brought them over and showed me the placentas. I just really wanted to see them, which was neat. That is the birth story. That is how it all happened. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to wrap it up quick because it was long. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that gave you some insight into the girls' delivery, labor, and delivery. It was a sacred experience for me. I will cherish it. I will never forget it. It was so empowering, and yeah, I think it's so important for women to feel empowered by their birth, whether it's a vaginal birth, a home birth, a C-section, whatever it is. You making your choices and being supported in your choices, I think, makes all the difference in how you feel about your birth after. So yes, it was an incredible experience. I'm so thankful to have these girls here, safe and healthy. Hope that ties up any loose ends from the birth vlog. Be sure to check that out if you haven't already, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye.